That cold October night, I was 18, 10 weeks pregnant, standing on the porch with my duffel bag at my feet. My mother looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're no longer our daughter. That bastard inside you is your problem now. Don't ever come back and shame this family again." Then she slammed the door and locked it. My father never said a word. 7 years later, on the morning of my courthouse wedding, they dared to walk in uninvited, smiling like nothing happened, demanding to meet their granddaughter. They had no idea I was holding an envelope I opened at 7:42 that morning. They had no idea what the first line said, and they had no idea that today, the person getting disowned would finally be them. My name is Ellie Turnbull. I'm 25 years old. If you believe family isn't always blood, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And subscribe, because what happened in that hallway will leave you speechless. Let me take you back to that October night in Birchwood, Wisconsin, to the porch where everything ended, and where everything I have now actually began. Birchwood sits about 90 minutes north of Madison, off a stretch of highway most people pass without noticing. 3,200 residents. One Lutheran church my family had attended for 3 generations. 2 grocery stores. A high school small enough that the senior class fit on the bleachers for one photograph. In Birchwood, you didn't have feelings. You had reputations. My mother understood that better than anyone. Diane Turnbull was chair of the Parent Advisory Board at Birchwood First Lutheran for 10 years running. She made casseroles for funerals. She remembered every neighbor's birthday. She kept the front lawn clipped to within a quarter-inch of even. From the outside, our white colonial on Maple Avenue looked like the kind of house people described as a credit to the community. Inside, the air felt thinner. My father, Glenn, was the kind of man who said a single sentence and then went back to his crossword. He worked 31 years at an insurance office in Eau Claire. He came home, he ate, he watched the news, he went to bed. He never raised his voice. He never raised his hand. But he never raised his eyes either. Not really. Not at me. I used to think it was because he was tired. I would learn, much later, that he was looking past me on purpose. My older brother, Brett, was the gold standard. Honor roll, varsity football, full scholarship to UW-Madison. He could do no wrong because, as my mother liked to say, Brett does everything the right way. I learned by age 7 that there was no equivalent sentence for me. By October of 2018, I had been carrying a secret for 6 weeks. I had also been carrying something else. I bought the test at the Walgreens on Highway 12, the one nobody in Birchwood went to because it was inconvenient enough to avoid running into people we knew. I took it home in a paper bag inside another paper bag. I used it in the basement bathroom, the one where the light flickered. The 2 pink lines came up before I finished washing my hands. I called Daniel that night from the back porch with the cordless phone, far enough from the house that nothing could leak through the walls. Daniel Brennan was a year above me when we started dating my junior year, except he wasn't, not really. He had been held back in 2nd grade after his father's accident, so we ended up graduating together. He had brown hair he never combed, a beat-up Chevy he had inherited from his uncle, and the kind of quiet that made people underestimate him. When I told him about the test, he was silent for 9 seconds. Then he said, "Okay, we'll figure it out. Just don't tell them yet. Let me get a job lined up first." He didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't ask if I was keeping it. He didn't ask anything that would have made me smaller. I wrapped the test stick in a tissue and kept it in the inside pocket of my denim jacket for 4 days. Then I hid it in a shoebox at the back of my closet. I had a plan. So did my mother. Hers was bigger. I didn't know it then, but she found the test stick on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at school. She put it back exactly where I had hidden it. She didn't say a word for almost 3 weeks. Instead, she started packing. Mrs. Whitaker, Patricia Whitaker, our neighbor across the street, saw the duffel bag come out one afternoon and sit on the dining room chair for 2 days. She told me, years later, that she watched my mother fold a baby bib into that bag and zip it shut and carry it to the laundry room. She told me she stood at her kitchen sink that night and prayed for me, not knowing yet what for. October 25th, 2018. A Thursday. I came home from my shift at the diner at 6:30. My mother had made meatloaf. The KitchenAid mixer sat on the counter the way it always did, red and gleaming, a symbol of the perfect house she had decided we lived in. We ate. Brett was at school in Madison. My father did not look up from his plate once. When the dishes were cleared, my mother stood, smoothed her apron, and walked into the hallway. She came back with my duffel bag. She set it on the kitchen tile in front of me. She set $63 on the counter beside it. She did not raise her voice. That was the worst part. You'll be at the porch in 5 minutes. You'll take the bag. You'll take the money. You'll find somewhere else to ruin. I waited for my father to say something. He was still at the table. He picked up his napkin, wiped the corner of his mouth, and pushed his chair back 2 inches. He did not stand. He did not look at me. He folded the napkin in half, and then in half again. I picked up the duffel. I picked up the $63. I walked to the porch. What she said when she opened the door, the words you already heard, I have not repeated since that night to anyone but Helen. The words she used about my child. The words she used about me. They are the kind of sentences that don't get smaller when you say them out loud. They get harder. She slammed the door. The porch light flickered. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I had grown up in that house for 18 years. The deadbolt took less than a second. I did not knock. I did not cry. I stood there counting the seconds until I felt safe enough to think. I made it to 11 minutes before a light came on in the house across the street. The curtain in Mrs. Whitaker's kitchen moved. A door opened. A woman in a navy cardigan walked across the street in her slippers and did not say anything. She just held out her hand. I walked. Mrs. Patricia Whitaker was 71 years old that fall. She had buried a husband 6 years earlier and lived alone with a tabby cat named Edward. Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon and dish soap. She sat me at her round table and put a cup of decaffeinated chamomile in front of me without asking. She didn't say, "Are you all right?" or "What happened?" She said, "I made up the spare room yesterday. The sheets are clean." I stared at her. "Your mother's been packing that bag for a month, Eleanor. I saw her through the kitchen window. I made up the room a week ago. The pillow is the soft kind. I was going to ask if you wanted it. I didn't get the chance." I cried then. Not hard. The kind of crying that arrives quietly because the body has been holding it for weeks, and finally noticed there was a person here who would not flinch. She let me. She did not pat my hand. She drank her tea. When I had stopped, she said, "There's a woman in Madison who'll be a better fit. Long term. Her name is Helen Brennan. She's Daniel's aunt. I'll call her in the morning." I didn't ask how Mrs. Whitaker knew Helen, or how she knew about Daniel, or how she had known to make up the spare room a week ago. I learned later that Daniel had stopped by Mrs. Whitaker's porch one evening in early October to apologize for parking his Chevy in front of her mailbox, and that he had stayed for 40 minutes, and that he had told her, not me, that he was going to need to ask for help soon. Mrs. Whitaker had a way of being told things. She slept on the couch that night so I could have the bed. I lay under a quilt I didn't recognize. The streetlight outside her window cast a square of light on the wall. I put my hand on my stomach. I said, out loud, into the dark, "We're going to be okay." I did not believe it yet, but I had said it. Helen Brennan drove 90 minutes from Madison the next afternoon. She arrived in a white Honda Pilot with 78,000 miles on the odometer and a bumper sticker from a craft fair in Stoughton. She walked into Mrs. Whitaker's kitchen, looked at me, and said, "I've been waiting for this call for 2 months. Pack what you can carry. I'll come back for the rest later. I did not know yet that Daniel had called Helen in early September, asking what to do, asking who she knew who could help if it came to this. I did not know yet that Daniel's mother, Linda Brennan, had been diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer on September 12th, and that Daniel had been preparing to drive to Duluth to take care of her, and that he had told Helen everything before he left. I did not know yet that Helen had already cleared out her guest room and bought a copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting and put it on the pillow. She drove me down I-94 with the radio off. She talked about her craft shop in Madison, the one she was planning to open the next year. She talked about how the leaves changed faster up north. She asked nothing about my mother. She asked nothing about the porch. When we crossed the city limit into Madison, she finally said, "My nephew loves you. Whatever happens next, you and that baby are not going to be alone." I did not know how to answer. I closed my eyes. The next morning, I tried to call Daniel. The line was dead. Not the kind of dead where it rings and rings, the kind where an operator's voice says the number is no longer in service. I tried again. Same thing. What I didn't know, what I would not know for 5.5 more years, was that my mother had canceled my line on the Verizon family plan that morning at 7 a.m., before I had even finished my coffee at Helen's kitchen table. She was the account holder. It was hers to cancel. Every text Daniel had sent me overnight, every text he would send for the next 3 weeks, was bouncing into a number that no longer existed. I sent him a Facebook message. It would not deliver. I emailed him. The email bounced. I sat with Helen's old laptop on my knees and tried every channel I could think of. By the third day, I started to believe what my mother had been saying for weeks, that he had left, that he had heard about the baby, that he had run. By the third week, Helen sat me down on her couch and showed me an email she had printed out. It was dated November 22nd, 2018. The subject line said, "Ellie." The sender was Diane Turnbull. The recipient was Daniel Brennan. It read, "Daniel, Ellie has terminated the pregnancy. She does not want contact. Move on with your life. Attached is a cashier's check from her father for $5,000 to help you start fresh. Stay away from Wisconsin for both your sakes. Diane Turnbull." I read it twice. The second time I read it without breathing. Helen said, very quietly, "Daniel forwarded this to me the day he got it. He didn't trust it. But his mother started chemo 3 days later. He had to be in Duluth. He held on to the check for 90 days without cashing it. Your mother got it back from the bank when it went stale. She kept the money." I looked at the printout. I did not move for a long time. "I tried to call him," I said. "He tried to call you," Helen said. "Both numbers went nowhere." I held the email at the edge with my fingertips, like it might cut me. She said, "He doesn't know yet that you didn't terminate. He thinks you didn't want him." I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Where is he?" "Duluth," Helen said. "His mother's not going to last the year." I did not cry that night. I went into the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed and put my hand on my stomach. The baby was the size of a lemon. The baby would never meet her father if her father believed she had never existed. That was the night I made a quiet decision. I would not chase him. I would not write letters that wouldn't be answered. I would do what was in front of me. I would have this baby. I would stay alive. I would let the truth find its way back if it could. It would take 5.5 years. In the meantime, I had a child to raise. Cora Elizabeth Turnbull was born at Unity Point Health Meriter Hospital in Madison on May 14, 2019. She weighed 7 pounds and 1 ounce. She had Daniel's exact eyes. A green that wasn't green. A gray that wasn't gray. The nurse asked me who I wanted to cut the cord. I said, "Helen Brennan. She's family." Helen cut the cord. Mrs. Whitaker had driven down from Birchwood and was sitting in the waiting room with a thermos of decaf. She came in afterward and held Cora and whispered into her ear, "Welcome home, baby girl. You have so many people who already chose you." I wrote Turnbull on the birth certificate because that was still my name. Helen said gently, "Don't add Brennan yet. We don't know yet what he'll do when he comes back. If he does." I put down Turnbull. I did not know I was writing a small joke for myself, one that would only become funny 7 years later. That fall, I started the CNA program at Madison Area Technical College. 8 months. Helen watched Cora during the afternoons. I worked nights at the Goodwill warehouse off Sycamore for $14.30 an hour. I learned to bathe a stranger. I learned to lift a stranger. I learned that my hands, which had shaken so much on Mrs. Whitaker's porch, were actually steady when I gave them a reason to be. My instructor, Ms. Bartlett, said to me once, after watching me change a wound dressing on a practice mannequin, "Honey, you've got the steadiest hands of anyone in this class. Where'd you learn that?" I said, "I had to." She didn't ask anything else. Cora's first birthday was held in Helen's backyard. Mrs. Whitaker drove down. Caleb Brennan, Daniel's older cousin, came with a bag of grocery store balloons. 2 women from my CNA cohort showed up with a casserole. Helen made a vanilla cake with 1 candle in the middle. She raised her plastic cup of lemonade and said, "To the people who showed up, that's the only family we count from here on out." That night, after Cora was asleep, I checked Facebook. My mother had just posted a photo of Brett, who had graduated from UW-Madison that month. The caption read, "So proud of both my children. Both." I closed the app. I did not open it again for 9 months. If you've ever sat with that kind of silence, the kind where your family pretends you don't exist in front of a public audience and then expects you to play along, drop a yes in the comments. I'll read everyone. Now let me tell you about the years that followed, because those are the years that built everything that came next. The craft shop opened in the fall of 2020. Helen called it the Honest Stitch. It was a narrow storefront on East Johnson Street, a block off the Capitol Square, with a hand-painted sign in the window that read, "All are welcome. No exceptions." I worked weekends there once Cora was old enough to nap in a playpen behind the counter. Helen paid me in cash because she didn't want any of it on the books in a way that could be traced. I didn't ask why. I learned later that it was because she had already gotten a quiet warning from a friend at the courthouse. My mother had called twice that summer, asking about whether grandparents had any legal standing to demand visitation in Wisconsin. The answer, in our case, was no. Helen wanted no paper trail leading her shop's till to me. I never saw a dime of that money disappear. Helen put every uncashed check from her shop's regulars into a savings account in Cora's name. She did not tell me until Cora was 3. In November of 2021, Helen came home from a trip to Duluth and sat me down in her living room. Her sister-in-law, Linda Brennan, Daniel's mother, had died on the 17th. The funeral had been small. Helen had not invited me because she had asked Daniel gently whether he wanted me there, and Daniel had said no. Or, she said, he had said something that meant no. The exact phrase he had used was, "I don't think she'd come anyway." "He looked through me, sweetheart," Helen said. I don't know what they told him, but whatever it was, it broke something. She slid a small photograph across the coffee table. It was Daniel at his mother's gravesite, standing beside the casket in a navy suit, his eyes red. I had not seen his face in 3 years. I put the photograph in my jewelry box, next to Cora's hospital bracelet. I did not look at it again for a long time. The next March, a small obituary appeared in the Wisconsin State Journal that I scrolled past without reading. Calvin J. Pierce, age 57, of Eau Claire, passed away peacefully after a battle with pancreatic cancer. Survived by his wife Annette and his daughter Ruby Vance. I did not recognize the name. I did not see the small black and white photo above the headline. I would meet his face for the first time 3 years after that, in a photograph I almost threw away. By the spring of 2022, I had my CNA license and a position at a Grace hospice in Fitchburg. The pay was $19.50 an hour. The first month, I paid my full $640 rent on the studio apartment Helen had helped me rent on Williamson Street. We celebrated with pizza from Toppers. Cora, who was almost 3, asked me, "Mommy, are we rich now?" I told her, "No, baby, but we're ours." She didn't understand what that meant. She would. That same spring, Cora had her first real asthma attack. It happened at 2 in the morning, the kind of wheeze that gets quieter when it should get louder. I drove her to the emergency room at Unity Point Health Meriter, the same hospital she had been born in. The paramedic who handled her case was a young man I did not recognize, a soft-spoken guy with a beard, who I learned later had gone to high school with Caleb. Helen mentioned him to me a few weeks afterward, half-jokingly, asked if I wanted his number. I said no. Not because of him. Because of when. I was 21, working 2 jobs, raising a child whose father did not know she was alive. I did not have room. She nodded and never brought him up again. Christmas of 2023, Helen gave me a small box wrapped in red paper. Inside was a 23andMe kit. She said, "I just want you to know who you are, Eleanor. All of you. There are pieces of yourself you don't have to ask permission to find out about." I thanked her. I put the kit on my kitchen table. It sat there for 2 weeks. I finally spit into the tube on Cora's pretend birthday. We did a small at-home cake for her in late December because I had been working a double on her real birthday in May, and I mailed it the next morning. The results came back in mid-January. I looked at the ancestry breakdown. 38% German, 24% Irish, 20% English. And I closed the app. I did not click the tab marked DNA relatives. I did not know that there was already a match waiting for me in that tab, one that would have changed everything if I had been ready to see it. I was not ready. I was thinking about other things. I was thinking about how Cora had asked, that Christmas, why she didn't have a dad. I was thinking about how I was 23 years old and had not been on a date in almost 5 years. I was thinking about whether I was building a life or just surviving one. Then, on a Saturday in February of 2024, Helen asked me to help cater her son Caleb's wedding in her backyard. I said yes. I borrowed a black blouse from Helen's closet. I tied my hair up. I carried a tray of champagne flutes out the back door and turned around, and the man standing by the back door was Daniel. He had a beard now. He was thinner than I remembered. He was wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit. We stood there with the tray between us for 30 seconds. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "Helen never told me you were here." The tray did not shake in my hands, the CNA hands. I set it down on the side table without breaking a glass. I said, "She didn't tell me you were here either." He said, "Did you really not want me?" I did not understand the question. I asked him to repeat it. He repeated it. And I said the only honest sentence I could say, which was, "Daniel, I have a 6-year-old daughter who has your eyes." He sat down on the back step. Not as a collapse, as a man who has just been told that a piece of his life he thought had ended was still happening somewhere else. The next afternoon, Helen sat the 2 of us in her living room. She opened her laptop, navigated to a folder titled "Whatever Happens Next," and printed 2 pages. The first was the November 22nd email from my mother to Daniel. The second was a scanned image of the cashier's check stub Daniel had kept in his wallet for 5 years and 3 months. Bank of Birchwood. Made out to Daniel Brennan. $5,000. Signed in my father's handwriting. Daniel said, "I never cashed it. I held on to it because I thought, I don't know what I thought. That if she ever came back, I'd give it back to her. That it was proof I didn't take their money. I said, "She cashed it back." He looked up. Helen said, "After 90 days. Banks returned stale checks to the issuer. The money went back to Glenn. Diane kept it." The room was quiet for a long time. I think Helen left at one point and came back, and I did not register her leaving. Daniel said finally, "I tried to call you. I tried for 3 weeks. I left 30-something messages. I sent every text I could think of. Nothing went through." I said, "She canceled my line. The Verizon line was hers. She canceled it at 7 in the morning, the day after she threw me out." He covered his mouth with his hand. He didn't say anything for a long minute. When he did, he said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I believed her." I said, "I'm sorry I stopped trying." We did not get back together that night. We did not exchange numbers and start over the next day. We took 3 months. We met at Collectivo on State Street, the same place we had gone the night of senior prom, and drank coffee while we walked each other through the years. He told me about Duluth, about chemo schedules, about the night his mother died. I told him about CNA school and the asthma attack, and Cora's first sentence, which had been, "More milk, please." We rebuilt slowly, the way a house gets rebuilt, board by board, with no shortcut. In July of that year, I introduced him to Cora at James Madison Park. We had rehearsed it. He arrived by coincidence. Cora was on the swing. She had been told by Helen that Mommy had an old friend named Daniel who used to know Mommy a long, long time ago. She climbed off the swing and walked up to him and tilted her head back the way she always did when she was studying something. She said, "Are you the dad my mom said was busy in heaven?" Daniel sat down on the wood chip path beside her. He didn't say yes or no. He said, "I'm not in heaven anymore, sweetheart. I'm here, if you want me to be." She thought about it for a second. Then she nodded. Then she asked if he wanted to push the swing. He pushed the swing. On November 14th, 2025, the night of Cora's makeup 6th birthday party, Daniel knelt down on Helen's living room floor and proposed with a small sapphire ring he had picked, because sapphire was the birthstone of a child born in September, which was when we had counted back from her 10-week test and figured out our daughter had begun. He said, "I missed 7 years of your life. I'd like to have the next 70. I said yes. Helen cried. Mrs. Whitaker cried louder over FaceTime. Cora put the ring box on her own finger and pretended to be the bride. Helen posted the engagement photo to Facebook the next morning. Within 18 hours, the first message arrived in Helen's inbox. It read, "Helen, we need to talk, please. Diane." A month later, on December 14th, 2025, Helen got the call that Lorraine Turnbull had died. My father's mother, my grandmother, the woman who had sent 6 hand-knit baby blankets over 5 years to a Madison address she had no business knowing, none of which were signed except with a single initial, L. I had not seen Lorraine in 7 years. I had not been invited to the funeral. I learned about the death from Helen, who had learned about it from Lorraine's attorney. That night, I unfolded the most recent blanket, the one she had sent on Cora's 5th birthday, and laid it over my sleeping daughter. I did not understand why my grandmother had quietly kept track of us from 100 miles away for half a decade while saying nothing to anyone. I did not understand why she had never reached out directly. I would understand in about 4 months. In February, a handwritten card arrived at my apartment. The handwriting was my mother's. The envelope said E. Turnbull, not Eleanor, not Ellie, not daughter. Inside the card was one sentence, plus a signature. "Eleanor, we have been praying for you for 7 years. We heard you were getting married. We would like to meet our granddaughter. Some things are bigger than the past. Blood is blood." Mom. I read the word granddaughter. I read the word blood. I read them twice, in the small kitchen where I had sat at 2 in the morning many times across the past 7 years, learning how to be a mother by myself. Then I tore the card in 4 pieces. Helen taped it back together and slid it into the folder with the November 22nd email and the cashier's check stub. She said, "Ellie, your mother does not write notes for nothing. There's a reason for the timing. Find out what it is before the wedding." The reason came in 3 pieces. The first piece came on the 1st of March, when Mr. Theodore Holloway, my grandmother's attorney, called me directly. He had a calm voice and a slow cadence. He said my grandmother had updated her will on October 22nd, exactly 6 weeks before her stroke. She had created a testamentary trust for the natural-born great-grandchild of the deceased, born to her granddaughter Eleanor Madeline Turnbull. The amount was $185,000. The trustee was named in the document. The trustee was Helen Brennan. "Your grandmother was very specific," he told me. "She updated this trust in front of 3 witnesses and her attending physician, who confirmed her capacity. She also recorded a video of the signing. She also left a sealed letter for you, addressed in her own hand. I am to deliver it to you the night before your wedding. Do you understand?" I said, "I do." He said, "There is one more thing. Your parents have already contacted me about contesting the guardian clause. I do not believe they have grounds, but I wanted you to know." I thanked him. I hung up. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall for 9 minutes. The second piece came on the 11th of March. Brett called me from the parking lot of a Culver's. I had not heard my brother's voice since the November before I was disowned. He was crying when I picked up. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have called you a long time ago. I'm getting divorced. I'm sitting in a parking lot. Everything I thought I knew about how families work just turned out to be a story Mom told me. I just wanted you to know. And I want to tell you something else. She's planning something for the wedding day. I don't know what. But 2 years ago, she made me do a 23andMe kit and an Ancestry DNA upload. She said it was for a family tree project. And she's been asking me about the matches ever since. I didn't think anything of it. I'm telling you because I think I should have." I held the phone very still. "Brett, you uploaded both?" "Both. She paid for both. She said she wanted to know what side of the family our health stuff came from." I said, "Brett, thank you for calling." He said, "Are you going to be okay?" I said, "I'm going to be okay. I'd like you to come to the wedding. You'd be the only person from the Turnbull side of the room who I trust." He was quiet for a long time. He said, "I'd be honored." The third piece I gave myself. On the 23rd of January, a letter had arrived at my apartment from a woman in Eau Claire named Ruby Vance. I had read the first paragraph and put the letter in the back of a drawer. I read the rest of it that night in March, after Brett's call. Ruby was 31. She was a music teacher at an elementary school. She had 2 children, a son and a daughter. Her mother, Mary Vance, had died the previous August. Her father, Calvin J. Pierce, had died in March of 2022. She had uploaded her DNA to both 23andMe and Ancestry DNA after her mother's death, looking for any family she didn't know about, because her father had always been secretive about his past. She had matched with someone named Ellie T on 23, and me at 24.8% shared DNA. She had not heard back. She had finally found a Madison address through a mutual school connection, and she was writing in case the silence had not been refusal, but uncertainty. She wrote, "I don't know what you know about my father. I don't know what he knew about you. I just know we share him. If you want to talk, I'm here. If not, I understand." Ruby. Clipped to the letter was a photograph. Calvin Pierce in his 50s, standing in front of a service truck that read, "Pierce and Sons HVAC, Eau Claire." He was wearing a flannel shirt. He had my nose. I sat at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, and I ordered an Ancestry DNA kit for myself. Not because I trusted Ruby, because I no longer trusted my mother. I spit into the tube 2 days later. I mailed it. I told no one. Not Helen, not Daniel, not Mrs. Whitaker. The result arrived in my Ancestry DNA app on April 3rd in the evening. I checked it standing in my apartment bathroom with the door locked, while Daniel and Cora were on the couch watching a movie. I read it twice. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I requested a certified physical copy by mail the next morning and paid the rush fee. I unfolded my grandmother's sealed letter on the night of April 10th, the evening before the wedding. The envelope was creamy linen, the kind you bought in a stationery store and saved for something that mattered. Lorraine's handwriting was a beautiful old cursive that sloped to the right. Eleanor, I'm writing this now because I'm dying, and I won't be able to say it out loud. Your grandfather Howard suspected for years that you weren't Glenn's daughter. I told him to leave it alone. He listened. I should have told you. I was a coward. Your mother had an affair in the fall of 1999 with a man named Calvin Pierce, who came to fix our furnace one cold week and never quite left her alone afterward. Glenn knew. We all knew. We just lied for the sake of the Sunday photos. I am leaving you what little I can, a trust for your daughter. Administered by the only person in this family who acted like family, Helen Brennan. Do not let them take this from Cora. I am sorry, sweetheart. The deadbolt was never about the baby. It was about the secret. Lorraine. I sat at my kitchen table without moving for 22 minutes. I did not cry. I called Helen. She came over in 9. She read the letter. She nodded once, slowly, the way a person nods when something they have suspected for years is finally confirmed. She said, "Get some sleep, sweetheart. Your envelope comes tomorrow morning." She did not tell me which envelope. She knew. I knew. At 7:42 a.m. on April 11th, 2026, a USPS priority mail envelope was placed on my doormat. I heard the knock. I set my coffee on the counter. My hands did not shake. The Ancestry DNA certified report was 12 pages. The first page was the summary. The summary read, in the bold center line, paternity analysis. The probability that Ellie Turnbull and Brett Turnbull share biological paternity is 0.0%. Genetic data confirms a shared biological mother, Diane Turnbull, at 49.8% direct match. Half-sibling match via paternal line. Ruby Vance, at 25.1% shared DNA. Most probable biological father, established via paternal lineage triangulation, Calvin J. Pierce, deceased March of 2022, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I folded the report into thirds. I slid it into a manila envelope. I slid the manila envelope into my tote bag. Cora ran in from the hallway in her pajamas. She had a daisy crown on her head that Helen had made the night before. "Mommy, can I wear the crown yet?" I looked at her. I said, "Yes, baby. Let's get you dressed." The Dane County Courthouse is a 4-story building on Hamilton Street with a flagpole out front and twin oak doors I had walked past dozens of times without ever stepping inside. Our slot in room 4B was at 11:30 a.m. The fee was $120. The marriage license itself was a single page with a county seal. Helen made the bouquet on her kitchen counter that morning. Daisies and lavender and a sprig of rosemary tied with twine. Mrs. Whitaker had been driven down from Birchwood by her daughter, Hannah Whitaker Reed, who was a high school principal and the only person in the world who could get her 73-year-old mother into a car for a 4-hour round trip on a Saturday. Mrs. Whitaker wore a silver brooch shaped like a rose, the same one she had worn to church every Sunday I had ever known her. I wore a slip dress from the Anthropology outlet that cost $98. Cora wore a cream dress Mrs. Whitaker had sewn by hand over 3 weekends in March. Daniel was already at the courthouse with his cousin Caleb, both of them in their best blazers. Helen drove the Honda Pilot, now at 124,318 miles. Cora sat in the back beside Mrs. Whitaker and asked her, very seriously, "Are you my courthouse grandma today?" Mrs. Whitaker said, "Today and every day, sweetheart." In the car, Cora asked me, "Mommy, do you have happy butterflies or scared butterflies?" I said, "Both, baby, but mostly happy." I held the tote bag on my lap. The envelope was at the bottom. We arrived at 10:42 a.m. The clerk who met us at the desk was Mrs. Anders, a woman in her early 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain. She had been a county clerk for almost 3 decades. She looked at our bouquet, our daughter, our license paperwork, and she said, "You're a calm one. I like that." Daniel came out of room 4B. He hugged Cora first. He hugged me second. He held my face for a moment and said, "You okay?" I said, "I will be." He didn't ask what that meant. He trusted me. Mrs. Anders told us we had 6 minutes until our slot. I told Daniel I needed to step out for one moment. He nodded. He took Cora into the room to show her where the witness chairs were. I walked back into the hallway with Helen and Mrs. Whitaker beside me. That was when I heard the heels. Click, click, click. The sound of a kind of shoe I had not heard in 7 years and 5 months. I knew it before I turned around. I felt Helen tighten next to me. Mrs. Whitaker stood up from the wooden bench she had been sitting on. She did not need to ask what was happening. My mother walked down the marble hallway in a navy dress, carrying a small bouquet of pink carnations she had clearly bought from the Pick and Save on the way. My father walked 2 paces behind her in a gray suit with no tie. Brett walked 3 paces behind both of them. Brett's shoulders were hunched. He looked like a man who had been brought along against his will and was waiting for a chance to make it right. My mother stopped 6 feet from me. She smiled the smile she had practiced. "Sweetheart, we came because we love you. We just want to meet our granddaughter. Blood is blood." I did not say anything. I looked at my father. My father did not look at me. Helen stepped between us. She is 5'4". She does not need to be tall. "Diane, you weren't invited. You can leave now or you can stay and listen. But you do not touch my niece's child." My mother turned her head slightly, the way she always did when she was about to ignore someone. She took half a step closer. "She's my granddaughter. I have a right." Helen cut in. "You have no right. You have history. They are not the same." Mrs. Whitaker walked over then. She walked slowly because her knees hurt. She stopped in front of my mother and looked her in the face. She did not raise her voice. She rarely did. "Diane, I watched you pack that duffel bag for a month before you used it, from my kitchen window. You don't get to pretend now." My mother's face flushed. My father shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Brett looked at the floor. The door behind us opened. Cora came out, holding a drawing she had made on the back of a courthouse pamphlet. A daisy. A stick figure she labeled Mommy. A stick figure she labeled Daddy. A stick figure she labeled Aunt Helen. There was no one else in the picture. She looked up at the woman in navy who was looking down at her. "Mommy. Who is the lady?" I knelt down to Cora's height. I kept my voice as even as I could. "That's a lady Mommy knew a long time ago. Go inside and show Daddy your drawing, okay? Mommy will be right behind you." Cora nodded. She walked back into room 4B. The door closed. I stood up. I looked at my mother. I said, in the same voice my mother had once used to throw me out of a house, "Mom, I have something for you. I opened it this morning at 7:42. I think you should read it before you say the word granddaughter again." I reached into my tote bag. I pulled out the manila envelope. I held it out. My mother hesitated. She gave a small, forced laugh and said, "Eleanor, this isn't necessary." I did not lower my hand. She took it. She opened the flap. She slid out the report. She read the first line. I had read the phrase, "her face went gray," in books my whole life. I had never seen it happen until that moment. The color did not drain from her face. It went somewhere else. Somewhere ashen. Somewhere that does not have a name. My father stepped up behind her. He placed his hand on her shoulder, gently, the way a man does when he is about to read something he has been waiting 25 years to read. He leaned over and read the first line. He read the second line. He read the third line. He did not move for a long time. He whispered, just loud enough for the 5 of us standing close to hear, "That's not my—" He did not finish the sentence. He never would. My mother said, breaking, "Glenn, Glenn, don't. Glenn." He did not answer her. He turned and looked at me. For the first time in 7 years and 5 months, my father looked me in the eyes. He did not cry. He did not apologize. He just looked at me the way a person looks at someone they have known and not known at the same time. I reached into my tote bag a second time. I pulled out Cora's hospital bracelet, the plastic strip, baby girl Turnbull. May 14th, 2019, 7 pounds 1 ounce. I held it up at chest level. I said, "You said you wanted to meet your granddaughter." This was the only bracelet she ever wore with the name Turnbull on it. None of you came to the hospital. None of you called. The closest anyone in this family came to Cora was Nana Lorraine, sending a baby blanket she didn't even sign. She knew, Dad. She told me last night in a letter. She knew, and she still chose to keep me, in the only way she knew how. My father looked at the bracelet. He nodded once, very slowly. He said in a voice barely above breath, "My mother was the best of us." He turned. He walked toward the courthouse exit. He did not look back at my mother. Brett stepped forward then. He held out a folded piece of paper. He did not hug me. He did not apologize at length. He just said, "I uploaded that Ancestry DNA kit 2 years ago because she told me it was for a family tree. I didn't know. I'm an idiot. But here. This is the name of the attorney Mom hired 3 weeks ago to challenge Nana Lorraine's trust. I'm not asking you to call me your brother again. I'm sorry. I'll testify against her if you need me to." He stepped back. He stood next to Mrs. Whitaker. He did not leave. My mother stood alone in the hallway. The pink carnations had slipped from her hand and were lying at her feet. She was holding the report with both hands now, her arms straight, like she was reading a verdict. She said, "This is wrong. This is a mistake. Eleanor, there has been a—" I did not raise my voice. I said, "Mom, you taught me one word for 18 years. You used it again in your card. You used it again 12 minutes ago. Blood. This morning at 7:42, the word blood stopped being on your side. It is now on mine. You can keep the report. I have a certified copy." She did not respond. Mrs. Anders, the clerk, had stepped out from room 4B at some point. She had a courthouse calm that comes from working there for 30 years. She looked at my mother very kindly, the way you look at someone who is having the worst day of their life and is going to have to find their own way out of it. She said, "Ma'am, are you here for a slot today?" My mother shook her head once. Mrs. Anders nodded. "Then I'm going to ask you to step outside the hallway, please. Ms. Turnbull has a ceremony at 11:30. My mother turned. She walked, very slowly, toward the same exit my father had taken. Halfway down the hall, she stopped, turned back, and said one more sentence. The only thing she ever said to me that I have not been able to repeat to anyone since. I will not repeat it now. What I will say is that she walked out alone, and the door at the end of the hallway closed behind her, and the courthouse was suddenly very quiet, and Helen put her hand on my shoulder, and Mrs. Whitaker reached out and squeezed my hand, and Brett, who had not been on the guest list, said, "I'm staying, if that's okay." I said, "It is." Before I tell you what happened after the hallway emptied, I want to leave you with one thought. If you're listening tonight, wondering whether you owe the people who hurt you a second chance, please hear me. You don't owe Blood your peace. You owe your peace to the people who showed up while Blood was busy locking the door. If that lands somewhere in you, share this video with one person who needs to hear it. Now, let me finish. Mrs. Anders held the door open for us. Daniel was waiting just inside room 4B with Cora on his hip. He had heard nothing through the heavy door. He looked up. He read my face the way husbands learn to read faces. Quickly, without questions. He said only, "You good?" I said, "I'm good." We signed the marriage license at the front of room 4B with Mrs. Anders as the officiant. Helen and Mrs. Whitaker and Brett sat on the front row of the wooden benches. Caleb stood next to Daniel as best man. Cora held the daisies for me and refused to put them down even when the ceremony asked her to. The vows were short. Daniel wrote his on the back of a Collectivo coffee receipt. Mine I had memorized. I said, "I'm not marrying you to make a new family. I'm marrying you to put a roof over the family we already had." He said, "I'm not marrying you to make up for 7 years. I'm marrying you for the next 70. When Mrs. Anders pronounced us, Cora clapped. She was the only one who clapped, and then everyone else joined in, late, because it had not occurred to any of us, in the calm of the room, that the appropriate response to a marriage is applause. We walked out of the courthouse at 12:04 p.m. The bouquet was still in Cora's hands. Helen had tears in her eyes and was pretending not to. Mrs. Whitaker was leaning on her daughter's arm. Brett walked at the back of the group with his hands in his pockets. Not sure where he was supposed to be in this family, but trying. 2 weeks later, Mr. Holloway finalized the guardianship paperwork. The $185,000 trust transferred into an account in Cora Elizabeth Turnbull Brennan's name, with Helen Brennan named as sole trustee until Cora turns 21. My mother's attorney withdrew the challenge 12 days after Brett's signed witness statement was submitted. There was no court hearing. There was no public reversal. There was just a letter from the attorney saying no further action is being pursued at this time. It was the cleanest version of justice I have ever received. In late April, Ruby Vance drove down from Eau Claire with her husband, Aaron, and their 2 children, Theo and Iris. They stayed for the afternoon. I cooked spaghetti. Daniel grilled burgers in the small backyard of our new starter home in Sun Prairie. A 2-bedroom, 1 bath, $245,000. Fixer roof, peeling porch. Perfect. Cora and Theo ran circles around the maple tree until they fell down laughing. Iris napped on Helen's lap. Mrs. Whitaker joined us by FaceTime. She could no longer drive to Madison, and her face on the propped-up phone smiled while Helen poured wine. Ruby looked at me across the table and said, "I spent 31 years not knowing I had a sister. I'm not going to spend another day pretending we just met." Cora ran inside with grass stains on her dress. She tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, Theo says he's my cousin. Is he?" I smiled. "Yes, baby, he's your cousin." She paused. "And the lady on the phone, is she my courthouse grandma?" "She is." "And Aunt Helen?" "Always." "And the man at the funeral picture?" I stopped. She had found Calvin Pierce's photograph in my jewelry box that morning. I had told her, very gently, who he was. "He was Mommy's other dad, baby. He didn't know about us. He was a good man, from what I'm learning. We can talk about him whenever you want." She nodded the way 6-year-olds nod when they are putting a complicated truth in a small drawer for later. 3 months after the wedding, A handwritten letter arrived at my mailbox. The handwriting was my father's. There was no return address. The envelope was thin. I almost did not open it. The letter was a single page. It read, Eleanor. What I didn't finish in the hallway was the word fault. I meant your mother's, not yours. I knew for 25 years, and I never finished a single sentence I owed you. I am not asking for anything. I just wanted you to have the rest of that sentence in writing. Glenn, I read it twice. I did not cry. I did not write back. I taped it to the inside of the kitchen cabinet, next to my grandmother's sealed letter and the photograph from Daniel's mother's grave. 3 pieces of paper. 3 apologies that arrived too late for the people who owed them, but in time for the woman who needed them. My mother has not written. I do not expect her to. I have heard, through Brett, that she has stepped down from the parent advisory board at Birchwood First Lutheran. Mrs. Whitaker said it was Pastor Wendell McKinley who asked her to take a step back, very gently, from her positions in the church. Mrs. Whitaker said that no one in town has heard her use the word blood since. I do not think about her every day anymore. I think about her on the days she would have wanted me to think about her. Birthdays, holidays, the second Sunday of Advent, the morning of every wedding anniversary she ever celebrated in front of a camera. I let those days come. I let them go. The starter home in Sun Prairie has a porch light that we keep on at night. It is the smallest detail of our lives, and the one that matters most. When Cora wakes up in the dark, she can look out the window and see the porch light on. She can see that the door, on this side of her life, opens. It does not close. I tell her, sometimes, when she asks, Mommy, who is my family? I tell her this, family is your dad, who came back when the truth gave him a road. Family is Aunt Helen, who had a spare room ready before she even knew you. Family is your courthouse grandma who walked across the street in slippers because the porch light next door went out. Family is your Uncle Brett, who picked up a phone in a parking lot and called the sister he had stopped looking for. Family is your Aunt Ruby and your cousins, who drove down with grass and laughter when they didn't have to. Family is Nana Lorraine, who knit a blanket she could not sign because she did not have the courage to do more, and who left you, in the end, the courage she should have spent on yourself. Family is who stays in the hallway when you walk out of room 4B. I used to think being disowned was the worst thing that could happen to me. I used to think blood was a promise. I used to think the deadbolt on my mother's front door was the loudest sound I would ever hear. It wasn't. The loudest sound I have ever heard was a folded report unfolding in a marble hallway, and 3 whispered words my father never finished, and a 6-year-old voice asking, Mommy, who is the lady? I was not disowned. I was returned to the people who were always going to keep me.